Everyone, welcome to the 20-minute consult podcast. And this week, my guest is Laura Shaw from Training Progress. Laura, welcome to the pod.
Hello, thank you very much for having me.
So just give us a little bit of context, a little bit of an intro. What do you do at Training Progress?
Yeah, so I'm a veterinary surgeon. I sort of trained as a vet, but I've not been in clinical work for good 10 years now, apart from a little bit of charity stuff on the side. But mainly it's I've been working for Training Progress, and my role is it's called a development consultant. But basically, I'm sort of there in terms of the development, but also the customer success side of the business as well.
Well, that's super interesting. So was a veterinary surgeon and transitioned. Well, that's almost a conversation for another podcast.
Yeah,
But I think
I like to think of am a veterinary surgeon and transitioned.
Okay, brilliant. So you chose a very specific topic for this pod, and it's the importance of document management. Very specific. Give us a little bit of context here. Why is document management important?
Yeah, well, I think all businesses have got all sorts of documentation, and I guess sort of the ones that we're primarily concerned with sort of Training Progress is the sort of SOPs, the standard operating procedures within a veterinary practice, and they've got different names. Some people call them protocols or agreed protocols, and some people call them how we do things, which is great, But I tend to call them SOPs just because it's a bit sort of people understand that. But it's about sort of making sure that everybody is singing from the same hymn sheet and has that sort of knowledge. But so many practices have these documents. They write them for the practice standards often, or sometimes they just write them because they know it's a really good thing to do. And then they're just in a variety of different places. And actually, as a tool, they can be a fantastically important tool for the business, but then they just kind of get lost. Basically, they sort of disappear off into the ether or in a dusty old file. So yeah, I just think it's something that businesses need to think about how they're managing those protocols.
It's a really interesting point you make. So certainly with my work with kind of tech startups, the intention is what I kind of call the knowing doing gap. They write the SOPs and everybody's really happy that we've written the SOPs, we've documented them, they're hosted somewhere that everybody can find them accessible. And then they don't really implement them. So they don't become, they're written, but they're not actions or activities that the team then start to really implement. Now, I appreciate certainly from a veterinary practice point of view, there are known kind of guidelines and approaches and best practices that individuals will take on a day-to-day basis. But when you're thinking more broadly around how the business, the practice functions, the SOPs become so critical. And I think, you made a point when we were kind of discussing the pod and the topic itself. You were like, well, look, SOPs aren't just standard, kind of things that are written. They have implications in terms of improving customer experience, patient outcomes, quality improvement in terms of processes, and something that I wasn't familiar with, but requirements for RCVS PSS. And so it's not just the simple fact of SOPs are something you need to do. They are foundational for some of these kind of key outcomes. And I was just curious for you to kind of expand on just those elements a little bit more in terms of, okay, well, how do they improve customer experience, patient outcomes?
Sure, yeah. Well, for me, it's really about consistency. So, particularly if you're for any practice, really, but particularly if you've got sort of an independent veterinary practice, your practice is really based on your values and the way that you want things done, the way you want your team to do things will then influence the patient care that they provide, that customer experience. And also kind of the efficiency of the business, way things are kind of happening. And it's just really important that actually those services are delivered in a consistent way in order to achieve those values. If you don't have that consistency, if people are just doing things, the way they did it at the last practice that they worked at down the road, or then you get this kind of hodgepodge kind of effect, and that consistency is not there. And potentially that can have an effect on patient outcomes. Absolutely, definitely customer experience. I think that's probably the biggest kind of thing is if you've got people doing things slightly differently, and those expectations for your customers aren't met, then there's that real kind of disappointment. And really, in terms of, obviously, we really want to make sure we're caring for the patients really well, but actually it's the customer, the clients who's bringing those patients through the door. They're the ones who are paying the bill, and they're the ones who are going to want to come back if their expectations are being met. But if they're not, they're going to go somewhere else. So that's kind of really important on that side of things. But also kind of looking at just the way that the business runs. If you've got lots of people doing things in lots of different ways, it takes more time. You've got other people to work on. Why did you do it like that? And it's just those inefficiencies. So really, if you've got certain ways that you're doing them, then you want everybody to be working in that same way. And also just in terms of team dynamics, if you've got people doing things in a different way, and it gets glitchy, and there's that sort of friction within the team. So actually, if you've got everybody moving along together and following those sort of protocols or SOPs, it really does make everything a lot more efficient, and then you're delivering a better service as a result of that. You mentioned practice standards, the CVS PSS, which is the practice standard scheme. So it's an accreditation scheme from the Royal College. It's not mandatory, although there's sort of some discussion about whether that might come in. But nevertheless, just the core standards are in fact what the Royal College expects and part of the sort of our CVS requirements. So actually, all the stuff that's in there you can't have to be doing, even if you're not sort of signed up to the scheme at a basic level. But the RCVS practice standard schemes does require for protocols to be in place for a number of things. And as well, the VMG, which is the Veterinary Medicines Directorate, they actually have requirements for specific protocols for things like your controlled drugs. Now, so again, even if you're not signed up for the practice standard scheme, you've got to do this legal stuff anyway. So you've got to have those that are going to be accessible, and you do need to prove that they've been disseminated to the team, that the team actually knows about them and are using them as well. So it's really sort of have a process for ensuring that, and making sure that the team have access to those protocols.
Absolutely. I love the piece that you kind of highlight there, just in terms of that kind of consistency of approach. Because, like you say, if certain team members or even teams, if you're thinking about perhaps the day team versus the kind of night team, if their approach to the actions, activities, and work that they're doing starts to change slightly, then you start to have these kind of friction points of just really understanding. You know what I mean? Clarity and understanding and knowledge sharing and ability to collaborate. And I think, that then, when you extrapolate that out, starts to impact the consistency or the type of quality of care that's delivered for the patients. And it can be a slow creep as well, right? It's not something that can be you're immediately aware of. It's something that can happen over a period of time. And it's not until exactly. And it's not until you start to really see the kind of issues cropping up. You're like, oh wow, okay, so this is really happening now. And then you've got to try and retrospectively change ingrained working habits. And that is a real challenge.
I think change is fine, and change is good. You just need to be aware of it. And so sort of part of that kind of, we're talking about the document management, part of you just need to consider document management in the way that you manage the team and the business and things. So when you have a meeting and you have a discussion and you decide, right, we are going to change the way that we do this, and hopefully that is something I really think is really important, is actually that the team get involved in that process. So you're not mandating stuff from above. Actually, it should be sort of a collaborative approach to these agreed processes. So, but when you have agreed that change, that actually and that kind of goes out to everybody, and everybody is sort of made aware of it. So that's important, that actually somebody is, at the end of that meeting, right, okay, we've got our objectives, things we've got to do, and one of those is someone's got to update that SOP, that actually happens, and then you've got you need a sort of system so it gets sort of distributed out to everybody as well. But in addition to that, so you've got that sort of reactionary think we've made this fantastic change and that's really great. But also actually you do need, in terms of the, again, sort of managing the documents, you actually need to be aware that some documents will sit there and have that gentle slow drift that you were talking about, again, which is fine and that's normal, but you actually need to have a process in place which allows you to review the documents you've got on a regular basis. I mean, the standard is a year, but sometimes we push it off to a couple of years if you just think on it. You do have to be able to fit these things in. So so every year or so, it's right. Actually, you check through those documents that you don't think have changed, but you'll be surprised how much has. And then again, that you're so that there's a sort of an active process of regular reviewing, just to make sure that those things kind of happen on a regular basis. So that would be a thing I'd recommend, that you don't just leave it until you have a massive change. You actually need to be doing those as an ongoing.
Let's dive into that a little bit. I'm a practice owner. I mean, the team are flat out. We're super busy. Yes, we know we need to do it on a 12-month basis. Best practice might even be every quarter, but we just haven't got time. So, kind of from that point of view, what is your encouragement or your challenge there? We haven't got time. Everything seems to be working okay.
Yeah.
So maybe we let that 12-month review drift to 13, 14 months, or it drifts out to 18 months. What's your kind of counter to that?
Well, I'd say I'm not. I think as long as you've got a system and you know when it's going to be done, I wouldn't say, right, you've got to do it on the 12 months, because I think, there will be some processes, that just, because you kind of do them, that there's things that don't change very much. And fine, you can, as long as you've got a reminder and you know it's going to happen, then that's great. Set it to 24 months, I don't care. But it's actually that you've got a process in place for that reviewing, and actually that it is going to happen. Because my little soapbox about SOPs is out of date SOPs. I think they're so dangerous. When you've got that sort of, when somebody, if you've got you've got your documents stored hopefully in an accessible place where people can get to them, maybe a cloud-based thing, they can access from a branch practice or home, whatever. But they can get to them, but the first time they go to them, if they pull up an SOP and it's obviously out of date, they go, and they're never going to look there again, because why would you? Because that was a waste of time you're doing it. So it's really important that actually that you do make sure that these things are kept up to date in order to make them relevant. Otherwise, actually, there is no point in writing those SOPs if they're not a useful reference source, if they're not integrated into the training so that actually people are training according to those processes, then they're not useful. But if they are kept up to date, then they are a fantastically useful resource, and it's worth doing them for the practice standards and all those sorts of things. Otherwise, you're literally just doing it as a tick box, and that's not helpful. What you want is for them to be actually a really useful training resource and a really useful reference source for your team members. But they've got to be up to date for that to work.
Absolutely, and I think there's a couple of points in that, in so much as, as a kind of practice owner, leader, you are accountable for updating those SOPs. And I think there is that accountability that you can't control sometimes when, one of your team members is going to access that kind of almost that document library because they might have a particular question or they're curious about something. And you have a responsibility and accountability to make sure that everything's up to date so that they are fully informed, and they can make perhaps kind of key decisions based on the information they're trying to access. And I think that it's almost, to your point, not thinking of them as a kind of reactionary tool. It's more, this is a live, living, breathing kind of reference point for your team members. And they may start looking at the SOPs before they highlight a particular challenge they're having to you. They might look to kind of do a little bit of kind of research themselves or refresh their own mind before they come to you with a particular thing that they're thinking about, whether it's a challenge or something that they want to change. So it's kind of thinking of it in that respect, in so much as it's a really valuable resource and hub for every team member. And to your point, what you don't want is a disassociation with it, in terms of when somebody goes and looks for the information, like, this is, we're not even doing this anymore. This is so out of date. There is that kind of responsibility. Make it relevant, make it accessible, make it useful, make it something tangible that your team can continually look to as a foundational kind of resource. Do you know
Yeah.
what I mean?
It means that it means that they've got easy access to that information. They're not
Mm.
having to keep coming and asking. I mean, for us,
Yeah.
it's consider it a time-saving tool. So your senior team members are not continuously interrupted with people, because that really, when someone asks you, can I just quickly ask, actually they've been
Mm.
looking for you for 10 minutes. That's wasted 10 minutes of their time, and
Mm.
and it breaks your flow, and then you get out of what you
Mm.
were doing. So it's we feel that you should have that sort of central hub where people actually can find that relevant information, and it's got to be up to date so it works for them, and then they can work confidently or autonomously and
Yeah.
make those decisions and get on and actually and do the things that make their job worthwhile, and it's
Yeah.
it's better for people's confidence in the way that they're working as well. I mean, that's one of the things you want your team to just to be able to get on and do their job and feel confident about it.
Absolutely. And if I put my kind of HR hat on, I'm thinking about kind of performance management. I'm thinking about, people's ability to deliver in their role, and the benchmark and expectation that we set for each and every team member. And the SOPs become another foundational pillar for that. Because ultimately, if somebody doesn't know the standard operating procedures, which links into their performance and expectation, then ultimately you're doing them a disservice by not providing that information. So if you
Yeah,
get to a
yeah,
point where you're perhaps subjectively thinking, well, this person's not performing, their
yeah,
counter to that is, well, show me the
yeah.
information, the
What do you want
matrix.
me to
Yeah,
do?
exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah. So again, it's not just from the sort of business performance and standard operation procedures from the business and the practice. It's equally each individual team member in there and the kind of expectation of them
yeah.
within their particular role and their
Yeah, that's it.
responsibility and
If you're
accountability there as
measuring your
well.
team members and how they're performing, you've got to have
Mm.
that. What is the benchmark? Well, this is what you want. We want you to do. This is how
Yeah.
we want you to do it. And obviously, what the other thing we try and do with our SOPs, encourage people to do, is actually make each one kind of relevant to the values of the business as well. Why is this important to us? Why is
Yeah.
and the way that we do things around here, so that they're actually it's not just this is how you take money off the client. Well, this is how we do it in a way
Mm.
that is reflects our values and things. So I think that's really important as well.
Again, and I think it's interesting and I wasn't aware that the RCBS PSS wasn't mandatory, because when I think about kind of certainly some of the kind of technology startups, when they had the kind of ISO accreditations and stuff like that, everything is mandatory. You have to kind of get those things. So I don't know whether it's just a kind of consultation period where they're thinking about making that mandatory and what the implications might be if it's mandatory. But I just kind of feel, to your point, that having something like that, having that kind of accreditation is a really good best practice. It says we're
Yeah.
committed to a standard, and we're committed to, kind of really, building those foundational elements, of which now I think, just through this conversation, if people start their frame of reference, document management, SOPs, okay, now they can start to see how foundational they are and the building blocks for successful practices, successful teams. So I think it's kind of almost reframing something that might appear to just be a process okay, we've done that process, but actually realize the real relevance and impact of doing this really, really well, having really good up-to-date SOPs, really being very intentional about the review cycles. And actually, why not having SOPs as part of your kind of monthly team meeting? Are there any particular SOPs that we need to think about now? Introducing that as a kind of almost a subject within the sort of team meets. Are we
Yeah.
all comfortable with SOPs? Is there any ones that anybody's thinking we might need to review and or update? Then it becomes something that everybody's contributing to, not maybe one or two, kind of leadership team members are responsible
Yeah.
for kind of implementing.
Yeah,
Is
I
that
think that
something
sort of
that you kind
quality
of encourage?
improvement
Yeah.
is definitely something that we talk quite a lot about. Um, uh, we actually sort of on our system, so training progress is a document management system. It has sort of and it integrates that into the training and things. So that is kind of what we do. One of the things we've actually introduced is this sort of help button on training progress. Now, originally it was a help I need training on this, and we still use it for that. But actually, another really important part of that is actually we're using that as a for team members to say make suggestions in terms of quality improvement for those protocols. So if there's something they're reading and think, oh, do you know what, I think it'd be better if we do it like this. We want everybody to actually be chipping in and making those kind of suggestions. And so people often will go away to, say, London Vet Show and these vet conferences, and if you send sort of 4 or 5 team members to London Vet Show and they all come back with 7 or 8 fantastic ideas, that's brilliant. But actually, you just can't you can't have that much change all at once. And what you don't want is people to lose their enthusiasm for those sort of ideas, just to sort of get sort of forgotten. So what we encourage people to do is say, well, use that help button that when you get back from the vet show, log all those ideas, and then even if they can't be dealt with straight away, they're there within the system. When that review process is coming up, you can go, well, let's talk about that now. We're looking at this now, so what about that fantastic new bit of kit that you saw? Is that worth it? Is it going to work for us? How we integrate that with the team? So I think it's sort of a really important that the whole team is involved in that sort of quality improvement of the processes, because they're the stakeholders. They're the ones doing the work. There's no point in somebody in an office upstairs sort of mandating how to do something when they're not there doing it themselves. They don't know what the necessarily the conditions are at the coalface. So I think it's really important that the people who are actually doing the job are actually the ones who are making those suggestions. Otherwise, they're just going to cut corners and do those kind of things anyway. So I think you need to get their views on board, and then if there's some reason why that you can't be doing that, then that can be explained. There's this really important health and safety operational reason why we can't make that change. But I think it's important that actually that the people are involved to make those suggestions.
Absolutely. So we come to the advice part of the pod now. So I'm a practice manager, I'm a leader, I'm in the team. I'm thinking about SOPs. I'm responsible for SOPs. I'm responsible for document management. What are your key bits of advice, regardless of where they are on their kind of journey with SOPs, and maybe even thinking about kind of document management systems, current, implementing a new one? What's your key pieces of advice?
I think if they're thinking of looking at their SOPs and actually wanting to make them a really useful part of the business, I think they need to make sure that they are housed in a way that is accessible to the team, so everybody's got access to them where they need, but also actually that there are suitable restrictions in place. You don't want people being able to access things and changing them or duplicating them and getting that kind of diversion. So you need to, it's a sort of that there's a balance between access and restrictions as well. You need to make sure that you've got that reviewing process in place, but also that the content of them is in fact integrated into your training. So again, you're not getting that conflict. I think what we often see in practice is these things are almost in isolation. You got those are our SOPs over there, and then this is a training that's going on, and that's just bumbling on as we have been. You really need to integrate those two things so that actually they become one, and it becomes part of the way that we do things around here, as opposed to the way that somebody said that we should do things around here.
Yeah, amazing. I mean, what this kind of conversation, Laura, has really done for me is, it's just kind of reframed things that I think typically people would look at as just a kind of process, document management system, technology, SOPs, process. But actually what you've really sort of illustrated is just that relevance of how they're foundational in terms of improving customer experience, patient outcomes, quality of improvement, quality of care, and really up-leveling, I think, the kind of ability for the team to really perform as well. And it's the responsibility of the leadership team to put these foundational components in place, help people adopt that change mindset, really link technology to training. You know what I mean? It's kind of almost like you can implement technology, but if you don't train people how to use it and adopt it and really sort of see the benefits for them in it, then it's just going to be a piece of technology that sits there with very minimal interaction. So I think what you've done is really reframe the importance of document management beyond, I think, perhaps people's just initial impression. So that's been super, super valuable. And Laura, thank you so much for being a guest on the pod. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you, Glenn. Really appreciate taking the time to have this conversation. It's been great. Thank you.